All right, everybody, let's get started. I hope that Friday was productive. If you were able to come in and do some Q&A with Assad, or, if you took the Friday afternoon off, that is also totally reasonable. So I just wanted to point out, just a reminder, hopefully you haven't missed this, but we've got our first quiz coming up at the end of the week. Has anybody been able to take a look at the practice quiz? Nobody? Okay, that's fine. Hopefully it's available in D2L. That is my goal. Please let me know if it's not there because it's easy to mess these things up, and I want to know early so that I can fix that. But there is a practice quiz, so we've got quiz 1. Quiz 1 will open at, let's double check, 8 a.m. on Friday. And then it'll be open all day Saturday. It'll close at 6 a.m. on Sunday. So, okay, the practice quiz, cool. And yeah, I'm hoping that the quiz 1 will open. I will double check it I guess I'll be starting class at 8 a.m., but I'll definitely be double checking it by like 9 on Friday to make sure that that's visible and all that. Because it's set to go automatically visible, yeah. Yeah, it should. Please let me know if you don't see this. It should be out of 5. So there should be 7 pages, but 2 of them are just like a reminder of the rules of the quiz, because I really want you to know that you can run Java programs. So if you see a question and you're like, hey, if I add a print statement to this, I can double check my answer. I want you to do that. So there are 2 pages that kind of say, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. Check that you read this, check that you read this. So they'll be, on the practice quiz, there's only 5 questions, and it should show you a score out of 5. It doesn't tell you, a detailed breakdown of what you got wrong, what you got right, but you can take it 3 times. And I mean, you're welcome to screenshot the questions. There are nothing dishonest there. Or, if you only got 1 wrong and you think you know what it is, you can go in. You can just take it again. You don't need to do anything special. You can come to my office hours and be like, hey, I think I'm doing everything right. Why am I still getting only 4 out of 5? Ask questions. Do whatever you want with that. And let me know if it's not behaving how I said.
It's not showing there.
Oh, it's not showing a score. Okay, so yeah, this is great. Well, I'll look at that right after this, because that is my intention. Yeah.
So I'm reading just down a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's looking at the resources. The thing that caught my eye was you can't Google anything, but can you use if you're looking up, can you use Geeks for Geeks or Veilroom or anything like that?
No, only you can access anything that's directly linked from the course website.
Okay.
So if there's a tutorial that's linked, on some of the lecture pages, if in some places I'm if you didn't buy the book, here's a reference for you. You can follow that link, but don't just, even if you're oh, I think I could get there from Google, don't do that. Follow the link. And don't from within there, don't use their search or anything like that. It would be here's except for the Java documentation you could search that's linked.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely feel free to follow the documentation link here. You can also go to this Runestone page. I guess you go to the MIT Missing Semester page. I don't think it'll help you, but you could. This textbook. But yeah, I can't really remember off the top. Well, maybe actually, I think in today's lecture, for example, I link to this tutorial, which is maybe this is part of the Java documentation, but even if this was like a Geeks for Geeks tutorial, you can visit this through the link from the webpage, course webpage. Yeah.
You might have already gone over this, but other than the Friday morning till Sunday 6 a.m., is there a time limit on the quiz once you start it?
Yeah, it's 1 hour. It should give you a grace period of 5 minutes. And then after that, I assume it freezes whatever you have. The description it gives, and like hopefully counts it, you know. If it like ended and you had answered 3 out of 5 questions, or there'll be more on the quiz, but you know, if you'd answered some of them, I hope it would count those. But the description wasn't that clear to me what it does. So you should submit. I would submit before the hour, and my intention is that it shouldn't take you an hour. Yeah.
The practice quiz on D12.
Yeah. Okay. So, yep, we got the quiz coming up. We have project 2 coming up at the end of this week. There is a lab 5, but it's just writing your own quiz question. So if you don't have a ton of time, you can. Doesn't have to be a super good quiz question. If you want to use this opportunity to write a really good one, that's totally fine too. But do remember to turn in lab 5 because it counts as much as any other lab, even though we're not covering any new material. Okay, so today, I think of today as sort of this is kind of finishing up our big focus on classes in Java and object-oriented programming in Java. So we'll talk about generics and then just kind of some last little things like you can have nested classes in Java. You can have multiple classes in one file. And then I heard from the TAs that everyone did really well, at least in one TA section, everyone did really well in Lab 4, but the use of public, private, protected was kind of random seeming, and so I wanted to cover some ideas on when do you use each of those access control modifiers. So, and then nothing from today will be on the quiz. This is kind of like things that are interesting and hopefully will help us understand Java better. And if you have a job interview and they say, have you ever heard of generics in Java? I want you to be able to say yes. And if you see generics, I want you to at least know where to start Googling. So just as a warm-up, one method that is going to be available to all of our objects is the getClass method. And so I just wanted to jump over to some code that we've written before. So I'm going to go over to our progression. We had our series of progression classes where we had our abstract class progression, and we have some subclasses, some concrete classes, arithmetic progression, geometric progression, and I think we might have had a Fibonacci progression too. But I just wanted to show, okay, we've instantiated a arithmetic progression, but we declared it of type progression. And so there's this type progression, there's this type arithmetic progression. Let's say I want to know what is actually the type of my variable prog. And I can check that using prog.getClass. So every object is going to have this. If I run this, I can see that, I actually get a geometric progression because on line 9, I instantiated a geometric progression and I assigned it to my variable prog. And if we were to look at the documentation for the getClass method, we would see that it's returning the class at runtime. and so it's going to basically be sort of the most specific class. So geometric progression is more specific. It's a child of progression. And so that's why the actual class of prog is geometric progression. Are there any questions about that? We'll call it a couple more times, yeah.
What would happen if you didn't put it in a package? What would it return?
Oh, you're noting how this is day 11 dot. Yeah, so then it just wouldn't have this.
All right.
And that's totally fine. This is just Java having a really strict hierarchy that it sort of maintains. So yeah, good question. Yeah.
So if you instantiate a variable, if you just declare a variable but don't instantiate it, what happens with the variable?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So let's say I make another variable, and I could declare it as progression, but just for fun, let's declare it as a geometric progression, and let's call it prog2. So okay, so we have things like we could consider, we can write this code, right? We can write prog2.getClass. Does anybody have any predictions about what's going to happen here? Yeah, I guess it's actually not even going to compile, is my guess. Yeah. So, and yeah, we can see that this variable has not been initialized. And so this is, we don't have a prog2 to call methods, on, right? And so maybe this can help us understand the difference between static methods and non-static methods. Because getClass is a non-static method, we actually need a geometric progression object to be instantiated to call it, or any instance of any object we could call getClass. But it's not just getClass that we can't call. We can't call any methods on prog2. But yeah, thanks. That's a really good question. Okay, so great. We know about getClass. So now let's talk about generics. I'm going to make, it looks like I already have a day 14 package, excuse me. So I'm just going to make a new class. I'm going to call this pair. And I'm going to close this. And before I even write any code, I want to just think about a scenario, something that I want to do. And so let's say I want to create some objects that can store pairs of things. Like I can have pairs of coordinates, like, in the Cartesian plane, I want to represent like an x position and a y position, and so then I want pairs of doubles. Or maybe I want pairs of strings, just things that go together. So let's say I want a bunch of pair objects that can hold different types of variables. For example, maybe I want pairs of doubles for Cartesian coordinates. I want pairs of strings for, these could be states and capitals, right? Maybe I want pairs of strings, we'll do this example in a bit, strings and doubles for stock tickers and bids, meaning like I want to buy 20 stocks of Twitter stock, and so maybe I need some sort of object to represent that. Okay, I have this task. We've learned a lot about object-oriented programming and inheritance and all that. Does anybody have any ideas, like design scheme proposals? How might I accomplish this task? No bad answers. Yeah.
So you could either use like you could make fields for each of the different types of variables that you want to store.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically with strings and doubles, you probably just want two different variables. One to store strings, one to store doubles, and then have three different constructors that stores the different types of variables in those fields.
Yeah, so I could have one pair class, and it could have many fields, and then we could have one constructor per type of pair, right? So I'd have a constructor for this stock bid one. I'd have a constructor for my pairs of strings. I'd have a constructor for my pairs of doubles. Any other ideas? Yeah.
Have like an abstract class pair and then child classes in each pair.
Yeah, I could have one parent abstract pair class, and then child classes, like we could call them something like double pair, string pair, and then I might get into sort of ugly things like string double pair, right? So yeah, that's using inheritance. It's kind of nice, but it feels like we're doing a lot. So yeah, those are kind of what I was thinking too. Maybe instead of an abstract class for the parent, we could use an interface. But regardless, I would say these are really good ideas using what we've learned so far. But surprise, surprise, generics, I think, make this a lot easier because we have this idea that we want to store a pair, but we want the data type to be something that we can pass in. And so we can use generics for that. So let's just go ahead and see what this would look like. We know what our goal is. We want to be able to have pairs of any type. And so what we do is we add a new place that we can pass in parameters. So our pair, it's going to have two types because it's a pair. So it's got first type is A, second type is B. Maybe when I instantiate this, maybe A and B are the same type. And so, great. We're going to have some fields, so I'm just going to write that here. We're going to have some constructors, and we're going to have some methods. So does anybody have any guesses about what my fields might look like? So A and B are the data types of that I'm passing in as parameters to this generic class. Any guesses how I might declare my fields?
Say like A then the variable.
Yeah, exactly. So I can say A, and I'm going to call this one first because my pairs are kind of have a first object and a second object. So I've got a first variable, and it's of type A, and I've got a second variable, and it's of type B. And so now this could be string and string, and then I'd have a string first and a string second, maybe string and double, string first, double second. But that's exactly right. Okay, let's make a constructor. We'll make it public. Any guesses about what? Let's say I want this constructor to take in both things that I want to initialize. What might this look like? Yeah. Oh yes, that is a great idea. I think. So yeah. Yeah, so skipping ahead to this kind of idea of like when should we use public and private, and probably why you all are writing totally reasonable code based on what I've been doing in class. A lot of times, when we're giving these examples that are kind of like stripped down to just show the idea, of generics. I think I took this example from the book, and in the book, they don't even say what the type of this field is because they really want to focus just on the things that make generics. But you're exactly right that if we're writing this program, these fields should be private because the rule that is at the bottom here is we should use the most restrictive access level that we can. And so we should be private unless we have a good reason not to. And if we don't specify, then we are using the default access level, which is anything in the it's basically public to anything in the package. And so the right thing to do is instead to make it private unless you need to make it a less restrictive access level. So yeah, thanks for that question. Okay, so yeah, any ideas on what this constructor might look like? Just kind of going along with what makes sense. Yeah.
Would it be like a space variable name, space variable name?
Yeah, exactly. So whatever we call it, I'll just call it, because any variable name could have worked. And then we're just setting our fields to these. So first equals variable 1, and second equals variable 2. And now let's write some methods. So I'm going to let's write some getters. I'm going to write a method to get A. So it needs to return something of type A. And so all it does is return this first element. And then I'm also going to have a getter for my second, which is of type B. So that means that I need to return something of type B. And there I go. Okay, so I've got some getters and setters. Any questions there? Making sense? I feel like it is reasonably logical. And then let's just write a string method, a toString method, so that we can keep sort of messing around with this. So I guess remember that a toString needs to return a string. It's very tempting to just have it print something out, but toString needs to return a string. And we're just going to, in this case, return a angle or a square bracket and our first thing, and we'll make it a comma separated pair, and we'll have a square bracket. Okay, I have an error supposedly second because I don't have a plus. All right, so that's looking decent to me. And then I'm just going to put another demo class in here for us. I will have it initialized with a main. I'm going to call this pair demo. And great, okay, we got a main here. So I think when we're writing our generics, I think they're pretty logical, but to me, nothing really helps me. I kind of just have to remember the syntax for actually using them. So if I want to let's say, make a pair of, like I said, make a pair to represent a stock name, for example, Twitter, and my bid on that stock, e.g. some number, like I'll use 45.33 because I think that's what is in the book. The syntax here to do that is, okay, so definitely pair, that's making sense, but again, we're going to use our angle brackets, and then we want to pass in the type of our first type parameter. These are called type parameters. And then my second one, and I'll call this by, and let's just finish this off. And like I said, we want to buy Twitter, and I don't know, 45.33 total stocks of it, something like that. I'm not sure. So, is anybody noticing anything about this statement? Maybe that we haven't seen before, or maybe that you weren't expecting. Yeah.
Well, double's capitalized, isn't that a wrapper?
Yeah. So that's a really good observation. Double. So maybe what we might have expected was that this could have been pair string is always capitalized, and then maybe we thought this was going to be double because, hey, we're passing in a double, right? But generics are one of those places where everything that we are passing in, everything that we're working with has to be of type object. It has to be an object, not a primitive type, and so that's when we're using our wrapper classes. But because of this automatic boxing and unboxing that we learned about, we can just still pass in a double, and Java's smart enough to wrap that up into the double wrapper class. But if I try to do something like this, I get my red lines, and I could even run it and see, I guess that didn't have as clear an error as I thought, but certainly I can't even compile it, and so I can just use the wrapper class. But yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping that you'd notice. I also saw some people showing me, we do have these angle brackets that we use for generics. So the syntax, I think I have it on here. So to declare it, we pass in our type parameters inside the angle brackets, and then we can. It's okay to again put those there, but they're not actually needed when you actually instantiate it or initialize it. So when we say this could also be empty, like we did over here. I don't need to put anything in here. But let's print out just confirm that this worked how we thought it would, and indeed, we have made this pair that we wanted to make. Now let me make another pair just for fun. Let's say I wanted these Cartesian coordinates that I was talking about. So I want two doubles. I'll call this chords. Again, I can use my empty angle brackets, and this is going to be like negative 1.5, 1.5. And I'll print out chords and run it. And here I have another pair. And so I think this is really nice. We have a lot of functionality with really that much code. And if we had done something like our inheritance from an interface or an abstract class, that would have been a lot of classes, to get at this sort of simple idea. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to do here. I think that's really what I wanted to show for generics. Any questions before we move on? Yeah.
I see the original pair.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are also on the lecture page from today. So pair.java is here on the lecture page. I think the only difference is we used a different variable name here, but exactly the same code. But was there something that you specifically wanted to?
Oh, I just didn't get setters and headers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're just, the key idea is that what we just need to return that, the sort of abstract our variable. Oh, I guess another thing that I should point out is I don't think Java is going to like enforce me writing these in capital letters. Like I could have written these all in lowercase. But the convention for let me just double check that. Yeah, so I just changed all my capital A's and B's here to lowercase, and I'm just going to run this. And Java's not yelling at me at all, but the convention in Java programming is that when you're using generics to make these capital letters and just a single letter. Yeah.
Can we use generics for other things other than like variable types?
You can. I think it's still using variable types, but there are also generic methods. So you don't have to, like, we made this class. We made this a generic class. But you can also have a class that's not generic. You know, I don't need to do this whole angle bracket. But I can still have generic methods within the class. And that is in the book, in the same section that generic classes are. Okay, so yeah, generics, very useful. So I also just wanted to point out, kind of wrapping up classes, we can have nested classes. You might have wondered about that. They are, I would say they're kind of like a lot of little details in terms of the syntax of using nested classes. And we should use these when we get to making our own data structures. And so we'll get some practice with those. And I linked to this Java tutorial that you can look at. And yeah, maybe we'll come back to this because I actually have some sample code for this here, this outer class and top level class sample code that we can look at if we have time at the end. I also just want to point out that we can have multiple classes in one file, but only one of them can be public. So you can have, let me just make a new file. Actually, I don't even, yeah, this is fine. Let's put it in pair. So say I had some other class that I wanted to have pair inherit from, or something like that. I can also put that class in this file, but it would just be class test, you know, blah, blah, blah. And that is fine. In this class, we'll mostly put our classes in separate files, but this can work as well. But you can't have more than one public class in a file. Just a little thing. Okay. So yeah, I definitely wanted to get to this style thing for access control. I mean, it's not just style. It's not just sort of making it so that your code is useful to other programmers. It's also helping you write good code, because if you're writing, so for example, this bullet point here is saying we don't want to, or they really both are saying this, we don't want to just by default have our fields be, or even our methods be public, because that can lead to some less ideal programming. This last sentence here, can anybody kind of give me an example or say this in their own words, or does anybody have, like, does this make sense? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really, I hadn't thought of that one, or that's not what I had in mind, but, so you're saying, yeah, it's useful, like there are some words that really describe well what a field is. Like, if I have a field that's representing a count, then I should call that count. And because of it actually wouldn't mess me up if I had like one class, if I have separate classes and they both have count fields, I'm not going to have any issues with that, but as a programmer, it might be confusing to me if I'm actually using that like count from this one class and using this count from the other class. And so if that's sort of hidden away, that could be useful. Yeah, that's a good idea. Any other ideas? Like if you're just accessing the fields of a class, what instead of using a getter method, any other ideas of things that yeah, like places that could lead you that would be less ideal? Yeah.
You can have problems with like global variables and like messing stuff up and initializing and whatnot.
Yeah, do you want to say more?
There was like an example of why you never use global variables that I was reading about how every time you initialize it, you'll actually reset the variable for like all the classes you initialize.
Oh yeah.
All public variables, so like every time you initialize a new object or instance, all the objects match that instance.
Yeah, I guess another, so, we have this we're talking about just our access control modifiers, saying we should be as restrictive as possible. But another general, probably programming rule of thumb would be make your variables as local as possible, so that you don't have this unexpected behavior where you changed it somewhere and you thought you only changed it somewhere else. Yeah, that was an animal just ran past our door. Probably, was it a crow?
No, it was a dog.
It was a dog. Okay, I was like, that crow was moving not like a crow. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a good idea too. But yeah, one, and maybe this isn't too different from what you have all said already, but we want to avoid directly accessing the fields so that we can hide away our logic as much as possible at the lowest level that we can, so that when we're changing, if we change that logic, we can just change that logic, and we don't have to change how we access the fields that's affecting or anything like that. So it's going to make our code more maintainable, more extensible, and more useful. All right. Yeah, so let's just at least run this nested classes code. So I'm still in. I'm going to close my pair stuff. I'm going to make a new file. And I think it's outer. Let me double check. Outer class and top level class. I'm going to make an outer class. And I'm just going to make my top level class as well. And then I'm just going to paste these in. I got my outer class. And I got my top level class. And okay. Who has main? Oh. Oh, I just put those in day 13, even though I meant to put them in day 14, and that's why it's not liking me, but I will just change that. Oh, I haven't saved this. Okay, so the thing that this is demonstrating to us, okay, so we have class, it's called outer class. It's got a non-static field and a static field. See, again, we can see in these tutorials, a lot of times we're not setting an access control modifier, because the whole point of this is to really think about this idea of nested classes. But when you're writing your labs and your programs, you should set your fields to private, unless it makes sense to have them something else, etc. So we've got outer class, and then for the first time, we're seeing here, I've got one class definition here and another class definition here. Can anyone tell me a difference between these two that you notice? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So one is static and one is, we just say non-static. And so how we, the syntax for working with these is going to be different. So we call, and this is just a sort of cultural thing, we call, when a nested class is non-static, we call it an inner class. For whatever reason, that's just the word that stuck around. It doesn't have to be called inner class. This is just an example. It could have been any class name. When we use an inner class, I believe inner classes, one in our a nested class, we're generally referring to a static class. And one of these, I believe the inner class, even if you declare it public or something like this, no matter what access control modifier you give it here, it can't access the fields of its outer class, whereas a static nested class can. They also have slightly different syntaxes for instantiation, but let's just run this and step through a couple lines and see if that is helpful. So, okay, we got a main here, and the idea is just these two lines, we're just saying, okay, we're working with the inner class. So this line, we are declaring and initializing a outer class object, and it's called the variable outer object. And then we can kind of see that when we have these inner classes, it's kind of like a long, to access them from the outer class, there's a lot of syntax here. So we've got outer class dot inner class, which kind of makes sense. And then in order to even use our new keyword, we have to say outerObject.new. And I think this kind of, to me, really says that the usefulness of these inner classes is mostly going to be inside the class. Like if I have some class and all of its usefulness is only in relation to some other class, then I might as well just make it an inner class. If I want to be using it outside of the class, then I might as well just make it its own class. I don't really get a lot by making it an inner class. But if it's all inside, then that's a nice way to organize your program. On the other hand, if it's a static nested class, then our syntax is a little simpler. We just use the name of the class, our variable name like normal, the new keyword, and the constructor. And so if for some reason we do have a nested class that we want to be using outside the object, it often makes more sense to make it a static class. So this code is available to you. Are there any questions right now, just looking at this? Any ideas about, yeah?
So, how can you make like your class a subclass of the class that's
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So you're saying like whether it would inherit the fields and the methods. So I think I can say in a sense it does inherit them because we can use, especially for the static nested objects, we do have access to the fields and I assume methods of the outer class. I don't know if there would be a time that we would use something like, my guess is that we wouldn't say, extends, but I would definitely have to get back to you on that, but that's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, great. Well, yeah, happy Monday, and we will on Wednesday have a review for the quiz. We'll go over the practice quiz. I will try to fix the giving you a score thing, and see you then.